So when you talk.
I'll go through and I'll just get us kind of started, get us down to the point where you're ready to elect the chair. I'll take the nominations for that, and once the chair is elected, go ahead and
Okay.
for somebody that objects to that way. So if we can, we'll call to order. Whoops. I say that, but I didn't turn my mic on. Just a reminder, if your mic is not red, we don't hear you, and the people at home don't hear us on the video. Mr. Fisher. Here. Mr. Nabholz.
Here.
Mr. Skoukis.
Here.
Ms. Pacell.
Here.
Mr. Trotter.
Here.
Mr. Weaver's here, I'm here, and right now that's it. So we'll do the call order. We'll have a moment of silence, and then we'll stand and do the pledge. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On our agenda, actually, the approval of the agenda. Have a motion for the approval.
I make the motion.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So we'll now take nominations for position of the chair.
I'll nominate Ed Nabholz.
Second.
It was a race.
You were here when we did it.
The old Groucho Marx. I'm not sure I want to be a member of any club that'll have me. Yeah, fine, Steve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No opposed? Okay, all right.
All right, oh, you want me to take it here?
So I will turn it over to you, and
Thank
you
you.
can go through the.
Great.
election.
All right, so I get to return the favor, election of vice chair. Do we have any motions, for election of vice chair? I make a motion that Alex should be the vice chair.
Payback.
Second. We have a second. Is there any other motions? Here are no motions. Do we have motion to accept? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, Alex, you're it. Okay, Alex, you get now to choose the secretary. I'll pass the ball to you.
Let's hear, anyone give me a motion for a nomination for secretary?
I nominate Larry.
I'll second.
All right, then.
All righty, good. Scott, we'll let you off the hook this time around.
Thanks.
It's
tough crowd here.
That's right. You show up and you can, the old Groucho Marx.
Seeing no other nominations, we'll take a vote. All those in favor,
Aye.
Aye.
any opposed?
Nay. Motion passed. Great. Public comment for agenda items only. Nobody out there? Crickets? Okay, that's good. Move on, minutes. We need to consider and approve the minutes from both the November 16th, 2022 and the December 21st, 2022 meeting. Hopefully the group has had a chance to take a look at those. Is there any comments or updates to those minutes? Here none.
I have a question about the seven, what was revised? What was revised from the original minutes? Yeah,
I think it was just an admin, like a date was off or something like that.
Okay.
That's just the name of my file, actually. It wasn't, yeah, it wasn't
oh, was
submitted
this,
yet.
this hasn't been changed since it was sent in last week?
No,
Oh, okay, never mind.
What you got around last week was the final.
Carry on.
Okay, then I make a motion to approve the minutes for both of those two meetings.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? No. Perfect. Move on, monthly report. I'll pass that back to Steve. Realize it's,
Yeah, so want to, typically at the end of the year, we don't give out a monthly report until we get more final, because we don't want to have something going around that's kind of a draft format. And so I just wanted to kind of go through some things that we saw in 2022, and which I think are probably going to be trends that continue into 2023, based on what I'm seeing now, or if I don't think that, I'll let you know. We actually had a really good year in the area of collection of delinquent taxes. I think the county had kind of really picked that up. And so we ended up in our tax collection being up about 164,000, of which 110 of that was more than what we had budgeted in delinquent taxes. So you can tell that was where most of that was. There was a little bit of an uptick in our real estate tax face amount, which is always hard to guess because we always budget off of what the county sends us in November. And for some reason, what they send us in November, when they give us our January numbers, never match. And the good news is it's always up, but it's usually, it's kind of hard to tell where it's going to be. And it was up about $20,000, $30,000. So it wasn't a lot, but that was where that was. We also had more collection in the area of interim real estate taxes of about 26,000 or
for
27,000.
Scott's purposes, maybe you could explain what interim is.
Yeah, so when we do tax collection, we have the face amount that you typically see on your bill. You have a discount amount, and then you have a penalty, and then that middle amount is your face amount, and that's normal tax collection. And so that's what we talk when I talk about face amount or talk about that. That's the typical, and that's the bill that comes out in the beginning of the year, just like everybody gets. If you've done an addition to your home, or you've done some kind of improvement to your property, there's usually a tax assessment based on that, and that's the interim tax collection. And then the delinquent, if somebody does not pay within the year, in January, the tax collector is required to turn that over to the county, and the county then becomes responsible for that collection. And usually the way they do that, if you don't pay your taxes within a certain period of time, they take it to sheriff's sale and in order to get the collection. So that's how that's handled. And like I said, last year was just an exceptionally high year. We tend to send about $40,000 to $50,000 over, and we tend to collect $40,000 to $50,000, in that year. There's always some that's behind from prior years, but you don't tend to get this much. The county obviously was pretty strong in trying to do their collections, which is good. I would think we don't have a lot outstanding, depending on what we send over this year. And the tax collector will probably do that. I think she has to have it over by the end of the year and end of this month. And so that's what I'm anticipating. Real estate tax transfers, that's what you pay when you buy your house or sell your house, I should say. That's down. We had budgeted $1 million. Right now we're at 80 or 813. I think we'll probably usually pick up something in January. The last couple of years we picked up about $80,000 to $90,000. So I would anticipate potentially close to that, maybe a little less. And then our local services tax is also down. We budgeted 720 and we've only collected 620, about 625. I anticipate collecting a little bit more, but I don't anticipate a lot. I looked at the numbers as of last night. I think they had collected, I don't know, $8,000 so far in January. So, which is, I don't expect a ton more by the end of the month. And so those two areas I anticipate will be down on. Business license area and permits. The big one there is the cable franchise fees. That's always late. That's usually, we don't get that until middle of February. It's always a month and a half after the quarter ends. I usually end up having, Rich used to have to kind of guess what that number was going to be based on prior months. And then we would book that, and then we would true up usually towards the end of the audit. Fines were also down last year. I think a lot of that has to do with the court system is still really behind from COVID. We haven't caught up on that. I anticipate that'll get straightened out sometime soon. I think they're getting closer back to normal, but it's still behind. I guess good news, if you want to talk about good news, interest rates were up last year. And so we actually had quite a bit more interest than we had budgeted, which was good. We had more than double what we had budgeted, because we just didn't anticipate the interest rates going up that much. The other thing that I would bring your attention to that were areas, our state revenue was up a little bit. Again, reminder, most of our state revenue is passed through. It literally comes to us and then goes right out. So we get state revenue for pension funding. That money goes right out. It goes into our pension funds. And then we also get money for the fire relief, which goes right to the fire company. Both of those were up almost between the two of them over $50,000. And so, the good news is the pension fund got about $16,000 more, and the fire fund that got the remaining difference of that. So that's all good. We have not trued up with the municipal authority. We need to do that. We'll do that in February. And when we do that, our other financing sources will be actually ahead. The bad news is we're ahead because we got several insurance refunds that if I were to look at it, I would normally say I don't ever want to get an insurance refund. That usually means that we've had an accident and gotten money that I didn't really want to have. So that's that. And then finally, I think what I would really talk about, the one that probably was the biggest area that if there's any trend that I think is going to continue is this trend. We had budgeted about 1.3 million for our area of permits and those kind of things. And we're down almost 300,000 there. And so that's what I anticipated. I've been waiting for that to kind of happen. I thought we might get a couple more in at the end of last year that would have kind of brought us up, and we didn't. And so we may get a couple this year, but I anticipate that number is actually going to start dropping off pretty significantly over the next 2 years. And I anticipate probably 3 years from now, we may be down about 500,000 versus being where we are today. And so the good news is that we'll shrink in what we do. We'll stop using outside vendors to help us do some of that work, and that'll all shrink down and do that with it. The other area that I would mention on the revenue side that was up was we had a lot of sale of assets. We sold off a ton of vehicles that were kind of sitting around that were older. We had an old backhoe that we got rid of. We had an old Mack truck, an '89 Mack truck that we had kind of used until most of the goodie was gone, as they say.
Who dumped that on?
Actually that truck brought a fair amount of money. The engine wasn't bad, but the body itself had started to rust and rust out. And it was the only stick shift vehicle we had in the fleet. And the person who loved to drive that actually had quit. And so.
So you could actually sell it.
We actually decided that it was time for it to go. Actually, it was not the one we were going to get rid of. We were going to get rid of our 2004 Mac, but we had a situation where we ended up sticking a ton of money into that truck. And so we in good conscience couldn't be the one we just sold off after we spent a lot of money on it. But anyway, we picked up 74,000 and we did with that, the board approved the public works team buying another F-250 that we put a plow on. We didn't put a salt box on. We have enough trucks to do salting if that's all we're going to do. But we really did not have a good vehicle to go around to the parks and to do those kind of things. We've been taking a 550 out to the parks, which is like taking, it's taking the big dump truck or, a small dump truck to go do a project that you didn't need that big of a truck for. And so we really looked at it and said, if we had another 250, George uses a 250. He's our public works director. He uses a 250. And if we had one that the guys could just use to go out to the parks, pick up the trash, do those little things, it just made sense. And, so I think we'll see that utility vehicle pays off really well for us, and will hopefully extend the life of our small dumps, which cost a lot more. And so that was our thought process. So that's where we are. Our expenses were kind of on target, a little bit behind. Nothing that I would bring out to your attention majorly. For those of you who've been with me for the last, really about the last 7 years that I've been here, we've usually ended, because mostly of permit fees, we've usually ended pretty strongly. We ended strong again. We had more revenue than we did expenses, but that has narrowed tremendously. Right now, it's about $200,000. Some years were over $1 million. And so this is where I thought we would be about 5 years ago. I thought this is where we were going to be when I did initial projections. This is where we are now. I anticipate that that's going to be the new norm. We may be a little bit up. And like I said, there's about $100,000 that we need to collect from the municipal authority for the work that the staff does for them. But that's really the only other major revenue that I know that's going to come in. That's not going to be offset by some expenses. So we ended the year in the positive. If we eliminate the transfer that we did, if you remember, we did I think it was like a $1.6 million transfer from general fund to the capital fund. If you take that out, we ended in the positive of about, like I said, about 200,000. If you had that in, we actually were negative. But I'm not worried about that kind of negative. That's just a transfer.
You have in the capital fund?
I think entering this year, and this is off the top of my head, I want to say we're about 9 million, of which $1 million is set aside for the purposes of I call it our rainy day if everything breaks loose at the same time moment. And then it's the remaining amount of that, almost all of it is dedicated to projects that's in there that we haven't pulled all the triggers on.
Right.
We have 3 dams that we've set aside $1 million to correct the problems that we have with the 3 dams. One of which I think we'll be tackling probably in the next probably 18 months. And they're all have on some level of deterioration that we need to do something with. The remaining money that's set aside, most of it is, we got $400,000 for the field out back. I can go right through the list of all the different capital projects, but we've got a lot of capital projects that we have that money designated for.
And apart from the capital reserve, do we have any other reserve?
We keep a 25% general fund balance, so 25% of our expenditures that we anticipate for the coming year, we keep that in general fund. And we do that. We made that decision. That was a policy the board put together probably, I don't know, 6-7 years ago. When we started talking about that, if we had that amount of money, if we had something like happened during COVID, you know, if you have a major event in town, what happens? Do people, fortunately, everybody paid their taxes. And mostly because COVID happened. If you remember, the timing of COVID was right after the tax bills went out. So people had kind of already paid majority. And you know, I think most of our folks in town probably survived COVID okay financially. But you never know, you know, if you had a tornado come through town, what would that do? And how would that impact us? And we said we should always have 3 months worth of operating expenses available so that we have time to make decisions. And, you know, I look back at the COVID time when many of my fellow managers were turning around and laying people off almost immediately, we were able to make decisions. And we were able to say, I don't have to make an immediate decision to do that. We have enough funding to pay, you know, our folks. And we were able to kind of start walking through the process and see what was happening. And if we had done a knee-jerk reaction, which would have been to start saying, we're just going to start laying folks off, we would have found in June, we didn't need to. And so I'm thankful that we were able to do what we did. And, you know, I think it's the right thing that we have that policy. We have a couple other funds that have a little bit of money in them, but those are the two main amounts. That,
those funds aren't used to balance the budget, right?
The policy states those funds should not be used to balance the budget. Yes. I can't say that would never be done, but it's, I mean, the board did choose to use fund balance this year to balance the budget. I think we have enough that it doesn't matter, like in regards to still meeting the 25%. I don't think that's going to be an issue. But they did use fund balance to balance the budget.
You can't do that repetitively.
No, you can't. You know, that's always been my argument for operating costs. We should, whatever that is, that's where we should be. And then if there's extra, then that's how we pay for capital and things like that. You know, we really don't have a lot built into our system. We're starting to build up for some capital expenses. You know, we did that with the road program. We're doing that with a few other programs, but we don't really have an amount that we set aside specifically every year.
Like a rainy day fund.
Well, or just even for expenses that we know are coming, you know, like, for example, we talked about the road program. We know that we need to be spending somewhere about $800,000 a year on the road program. And we're finally there. We have enough money to do, you know, we have that money in place. But we also know that in public works replacement of their vehicles, we should have 250,000, and I think we're up to 50 or 75,000 this year. We just started doing that for the fire company.
Right.
We know we need 250 for the fire company. I think this year we put in the budget 25, you know, so it's the first year we're doing that. We looked at that in light of like street lights that we know we're going to have to replace every 15 years. You know, there's certain things that we're trying to start building that so that when we come to it, we just go, we have the money, we pay for it, you know, hopefully like we run our own personal accounts on some level that we, you know, my wife and I put money aside starting the first month for all of our insurances. So when the insurance bill comes, we write the check and it's just, we're not going, oh crud, this month
Certain
I've got.
projects may go ahead of other ones depending upon need and reassessment.
Right.
Where you're trying to build each one.
But we're trying to build each one
Yeah.
so that we're in a position going forward that the township, we would borrow if we're doing a major thing. Like if we're renovating a building, you know, and doing a major project like that, that makes sense to have debt. But does it really make sense to have debt for something that you know you have to repeat every year? And that's the area where we're trying to build so that we're not doing that.
Push comes to shove, can you move money from the capital account into the operating?
So the board has the authority to move money as long as the money. It depends on how the money is gotten there and where we got it from. There are some dollars that become restricted. So if we get, so for example, we have some dollars that we've actually by law had to set up in a separate fund because we got ARPA money. And so when we got that 1.4 million, those dollars are set aside separately. But sometimes when we get a grant, we don't have to put that in a separate checking account or in a separate fund. And those would go into the capital fund. Those dollars could never be moved to operating because they're restricted. And so the answer is yes, but it may not be the entire amount, depending on where the values are, if that makes sense. Any other questions?
If, Scott, for your purposes, as we get into the year, there's a really nice condensed report that's put out each month to be able to see and track both revenue, expense. We're developing more on the capital side. I think to Alex's point, ultimately, what may be needed is, especially as the non-recurring revenue, the permit revenue and that stuff, and transfer taxes start to drop, it may become important that we actually see what the amount in reserve in the general fund that's not allocated to any specific project, because that'll tell us, I think, right away whether or not we're getting close to the line. Now, you may already produce that. I'm not 100% sure.
We
I've
do
never
produce,
seen
we
it.
do produce that. We just don't do, we do it usually on an annual basis, not on a monthly basis.
So maybe
'cause
on a quarterly basis. or
That
something
number,
like
that number just throughout the year, those
Yeah, I would
numbers
expect it
fluctuate
as the revenue flows.
so heavily. You know, we are way heavy on revenue in
Right,
in
first 6
in
months.
March, because we send out the tax bills. You know, if you look at our budget, we're about 10, 11 million. 6 million of that is real estate taxes. So we are highly dependent upon real estate taxes. That typically is sent out at the end of January, early part of February, and the revenues start March and April. That's most people try to pay in the discount period. And so we see like this huge flow in that period of time. And if I would look at that, you would say, oh, we're really cash heavy. Well, we are cash heavy during those months. And usually we spend down that money throughout the rest of the year, you know, because we have.
So if you looked at it on a month, like say September,
Yeah,
you would see, wow, we're spending down out of that reserve. Our inflow of revenue is dramatically less than expense.
potentially.
But that's
Yeah.
because of the acceleration of the revenue side.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah.
That's why you look at it on a month to month, like what was the change this month? You'd get a false read.
That, and that's really typical with government. Like we have certain funds that come in at certain times of the year. You know, liquid fuels hits in March, but then you have the pension fund monies and the fire fund monies. They always come in September. The check usually doesn't go out until October, you know, just timing wise. And so, you know, it's those kind of things that I always get a little bit hesitant to get too excited about what we're watching in any one month, because a lot of businesses are much more, you know, you might have a real big uptick in December if you're retail, and you know, you're going to manage to that the rest of the way. I almost think of it in that kind of a light, but you know, we're not seeing sales month over month grow or those kind of things. You know, typically we're much more flat.
On the permit revenue, you know, I've always had the issue with, you know, if we bring in more revenue than that department has an
Then-
expense, and, you know, and I've always argued that our permit department shouldn't be a profit center. for
Right.
the Township, so it sounds though like now we will, as those permit revenues are coming down, that we're gonna have the revenue match the expenses for the department.
That was the
Maybe a
goal.
Couple years.
That the goal was that it should always kind of try to match as close as possible, knowing that we had these couple. And it, like, I really thought it was a couple of years, and it ended up being a lot longer than that, you know, because I was told when I first came that like the town center was going to be done, you know, everybody thought it was going to be done in 4 or 5 years, and we were gonna have this really quick piece. And, we've had to bring on additional resources to handle that. We chose not to bring them on as personnel. So the personnel part is lower, but we have contractor expenses that are higher.
Yeah.
And
Throw
all of
the
that,
Switch on those.
and so when that goes away, hopefully the idea is we stop using the contractors and then we cover it in-house. The one place where I don't know that's going to be the case will be whether we do that with electrical. Electrical inspections still may be done by a third party, only because what it takes to be certified electrically. Andy can do that, but it's, when you've got so many different things that somebody's looking at, we may just keep that for now.
So what I'm getting at is that the drop in the permit revenue for us isn't that big of a concern.
No, I anticipated it was coming.
Any other questions? Great, so we'll move on to new business. I had a couple of points here. The first one, Steve, in terms of hires and specifically whether or not you were able to make any progress on candidates for Rich's position.
Yeah, so I think if I recall, maybe in December, I announced that we hired a part-time bookkeeper, Mike. He's been working with us now about a month and a half, I guess. Still getting his feet wet, trying to figure out exactly what's going on.
Is your thought process kind of a test drive? To see whether or not-
We hired him with a 6-month kind of thing, and the reason for that really was the twofold. One, for him to say, I gave him a way out. He's a retired gentleman. If he gets to the end of 6 months and says, "This wasn't what I thought, this wasn't what I was hoping for," he doesn't even have to feel bad. He can just walk out the door.
Right.
These
You guys are crazy. Yeah. You guys are crazy.
Yeah. Well, we are, but that's okay. And then the second piece was, because we hadn't hired Rich's replacement yet, I really thought it was important that it's going to be a she, by the way. When she comes in, I thought it was important that if this wasn't the right match for her, she had the ability to make that decision as well. So it works both sided.
All right, so you're working on the permanent.
So where we are with let me tell you where we are with the permanent one. I've met with the board in executive session. They basically given me the go ahead with the person that I'm moving forward with. We were doing the background checks. My belief is that on Monday night, we'll be doing that officially on the floor as a piece, and she's probably going to be here Monday night. That's the plan. The only thing we're waiting on is the drug test back. Her background check came back fabulously. No problems there. And just looks like she's a real solid candidate all the way around. Great background. She spent 17 years over in New Jersey. And I think I can say this because I know she's at least let her folks know, as part of the background check, she had to let her folks know what was going on. So she's from Harrison Township in New Jersey, and which is kind of just outside of Swedesboro, Glassboro area. She's been there 17 years. So she has a really solid finance background. She'll have probably a learning curve coming over to Pennsylvania. We're not that, the numbers are different, like account numbers and those kind of things. We use a different set of chart of accounts, but the concepts will all be similar. And so we're getting somebody who's got a strong background. Actually, she had 3 years before that in another municipality. So I feel really strong about that. And my understanding is from time to time, she's actually done, even while at Harrison, she's done another township. Like they often cross and have people do multiple jobs. I think it's a great idea. I've been watching this and saying, why aren't we doing that in Pennsylvania? Other than the fact that I would be dying right now if we were picking up somebody else's as well. So, but anyway, I would say this, that I feel really confident. Her name's Yvonne. I believe that she'll be in for sure. Like Monday night, unless something goes drastically wrong with the drug test. And then,
So we can pepper her at the meeting in February?
let me
That's
just
the
check.
plan.
I know. I was actually going to just check to see if she'll be here by the time of that. She will start the 20th
Oh, okay.
of February,
Nice.
which I think will be, I think we're the
Yeah.
15th.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So she's gonna miss us.
She's
Okay.
going to miss us. She's actually taking
You
vacation.
warned her. Okay.
Yeah, I've warned her. Yeah, and but she'll be starting on the 21st is the intent.
Okay.
And so
Great news.
we're excited about that. To be honest with you, even with her having a strong finance background, I suspect it's going to take her at least a year
Yeah.
to get her feet wet
Well,
and really start to do that.
Is she a resident of New Jersey or resident of PA?
Resident PA.
Good.
Yeah, she commutes over to New
She
Jersey.
commutes that way.
She
Okay,
commutes
great.
that way. Her commute will be about the same.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of did that. Actually, I think it'll be about 5 minutes more, even though she lives here in Pennsylvania. So she lives in the city and so she's coming over.
Okay, well,
For
that's good.
a friend, what drug tests do you have to pass to have a job?
What drug test do you have to pass?
Yeah.
I don't, I'm not even 100% sure. I know it's a drug test.
I'm pretty sure there's a PA
It's-
state standard.
Well, it's a standard drug test. We use the same one that we use for CDLs. And so whatever that drug test is, we use
What's a CDL?
Commercial.
commercial to driver's license. That's the standard that we use for all hires, because they're driving township vehicles. And so we just, not that everybody's driving a
Not that she's
dump
gonna
truck.
take the dump truck out.
Yeah, she's not having to take the dump truck out now. But we use that as a standard for all hires, that way we have confidence behind the people we put behind the wheel.
And are we a bigger budget than anything or smaller?
I think we're about the same. We're pretty close. Their population, I think, is a little bit higher than us, but their budget's about the same as ours.
Great news.
Yeah, I think it's a great win for us.
Because I know you were worried when that happened with Rich. that it
Yeah,
was gonna take too long. In this market especially.
yeah, I was gonna say in this market, I'm
Yeah.
thrilled.
Good news.
I was really concerned we were gonna bring somebody on that I was gonna have to spend time going, this is a debit, this is a credit, not
Right.
quite that bad, but
No,
but that's, but government finance is different. And we had, over half of our actually, I think we had 3 that had government experience that applied. Most of the people that applied did not have government experience. And so I get
that
it.
learning curve.
Look, I came from a non-government, so I get it. I know it can be done. I don't question that it can be done. Rich didn't come from a government background. But it helps when you come from a government background. It will hopefully shorten the learning curve and bring it along.
Great.
The other big topic that surfaced at the end of the last year involved actually having some goals that are specific to the board members here, the 5 of us, in terms of things that they would want to specifically step out and say, okay, I want to do this coming year. I want to take responsibility for this particular initiative or this particular project, that type of thing. So I wanted to resurface this. Obviously, Scott's new, so he's getting blindsided by this. But I think everybody else here hopefully is given a little bit of thought about, can they commit to, whether or not they need another month, but can they commit to specifying a goal and how do we want to handle that?
Yeah, I would say this, you could bring it up today. You can't finalize it today because it wasn't on the agenda.
Got it.
So you could bring it up
All right,
and
so maybe Steve, you put that on the
What-
agenda for
I've got it
February's
written down
meeting,
for
Yeah.
it to be on there for next time.
that we have some specific goals that we want to take responsibility for 2023.
Do we have a list of initiatives? Look at that.
Good question.
Yeah, that's great.
So here's what I would suggest for you to think about if there's something, a couple things. One, I would suggest everybody take a look at the strategic plan first and foremost. That would be our place to start. Because everything
Is
should,
that on the website?
it is. And everything should line, it may be listed as draft still, but it is the one that they adopted. that should be the basis of which everything fits. If it doesn't fit within our strategic plan, we should really be having a conversation as to why we're doing it. I mean, I understand things change over time, but that's that part. Secondly, I would suggest, the big thing that we've worked on the last year, and I know Lisa and Ed have been on that, has been it's been the issue of stormwater, how we're going to handle the fact that we have really a very large expense if we're going to really manage stormwater all over town that we need to figure out, and then how does that fit? And so that's a big initiative. The other one that I think that we could probably start having a conversation about, and I say that is, I know that our capital is actually, the capital expectations or needs are greater than capital funding. And so it would probably not be bad to have some folks from this committee. I know we're doing it for stormwater, but to probably broaden that and look at the whole capital piece and really put together a real capital plan of that makes sense, not just that we keep throwing things out as they come up, but really say, we know that the building is going to need X, Y, and Z.
Prioritize, is this year 1, is this year 3, is this
Exactly.
year 5?
And then start really looking at realistically, how do we think we're going to fund that? Because that's the big piece, the funding of capital projects is probably the hardest piece that we have to do, in regards. Typically your operating costs stay pretty close the same. I would like to start forecasting 10 years out. It's hard to do in government. There's so many things that are moving parts, but I would like to get to the spot that we're forecasting about 10 years out. I think that would help the board. Not that I know that I'm going to be here for 10 more years, but that, just that if we had a plan that was in place, sorry, my computer's making all these noises. But if we had a plan that was in place, that would be ideal. And so that might be something as another initiative that the finance committee would work on. We had talked, going back to the stormwater, I think that's really going to probably be all 5 members to some level.
That's
of
the one
helping to
I
do
was thinking about,
communication.
someone on the non-financial side, the public face-off with the community, just to being a central point on the communication aspect, not necessarily the numbers, because I think Lisa and I are deep in the numbers and all our history and all our notes and things, but we're having someone that's going to interact with Parks and Rec, someone that's interact with EAC. Do they want to do something? Do we want to organize a town hall? How do we want to face off on that? Do we need to do another newsletter? Those types of things.
Well, here's what we've committed this year, newsletter wise. We've sent the first one in. We've got almost probably half or more of that newsletter is dedicated to stormwater type articles.
Did you write that?
I did not. George wrote that.
Really? Very good.
He is probably our best writer on staff. I mean, seriously, hands down, the best writer on staff.
Wait till you see it. When you see it, it's really, I don't know if you saw it or not. It's really very good.
And
he's going back to colonial times. It's perfect.
I mean, I think he did a fabulous job on the article. And it'll be in the newsletter that comes out this next go round. Happy to share it ahead of time before it even goes out.
Hey, Steve, maybe you can send it to everybody.
We can send it to everybody on the board so that they get
The
it.
draft, but
The draft,
This is it.
but
Yeah.
we haven't finalized everything with them and the layout and things like that, but
the text.
the context is final. George is probably, like I said, George is the best writer we have. He's our public works director, but is really gifted
Very impressive.
with the English language and also has a really good way of doing research and putting it out. I think that is understandable to just about anybody. And so I've always thought that if George wasn't our public works director, he should be our communications director.
He's already got a job.
He's already got that job. He's already got a job that he does incredibly well. And so, but, yeah, so just kind of saying that we've committed all 4 issues this year of our newsletter are going to be directed at things related to stormwater. The closer we get to where we're going to be, will be how we do some specific things and what we present as to how we're going to pay for it. But right now, we're building the case that we have an issue that we have to address. And I think George's article really set the pace for the next article, which I'm probably going to ask him to write. Because I think he did so well on this one. And the
But
good
I
news-
mean, but just to take some pressure off of him, I think it really should be a collaborative.
oh, absolutely.
Where
I mean, we want to
Him,
come in
EAC, Parks and Rec, Finance,
everybody.
it should be, everybody should have
And
skin
we,
in the game on it.
and we did ask the other committees to make their articles such. And I think, you know, in the next 2 issues, I would see finance having an article. I think you had one in even this time.
Yeah,
But we would have another one starting to really talk about the dollars and, you know, really start like, because that's what finance can do is lay out that piece. And then you're right. I think there'll probably be town halls and all kinds of things like that to address this, because it's a big issue.
Right.
It's not going away. It's, you know, it's continuing to grow. I don't think it's changing.
It's not getting small.
It's not getting smaller,
And we
exactly.
hope we don't have a California.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know,
Okay. In terms of, okay, then we're gonna hold on making commitments on goals and what's planned to be February that we get.
I
some
mean, you could
formality.
talk about, you just can't make decisions on them
Got it.
today.
Okay, so we'll plan for that in February. Any other new business? Okay, old business. Lisa and I had a chance to huddle over the holidays and then earlier this month. And kind of went through our notes and trying to determine path that from a directional perspective, are we on the right path? Lisa and I, is this something that kind of makes sense for the other members of the committee? And I guess what we did was we said what we initially developed, which I think you all have a copy of from back in November. It was kind of very busy in a very complex topic about numbers. And what we said was, okay, let's step back and let's just put a snapshot out of what the numbers are, what we know at this point in time at a very high level, with the thought being for each of the options, we then say, okay, we'll have a supporting page that will talk about how do we arrive at that number, and are there hurdles with that number? Is that really something that we can't push a button and put in tomorrow morning? And so what we did was, do you have the copies of this? Copy of this?
I have my copy.
Oh, okay.
And
Are you up on the
Steve has.
Can you put it up?
There we
Okay,
go.
great. And can you make it a little bigger here? I'm gonna share this with you guys. Here, Alex, here, look here, so you don't. your neck.
Here,
Okay,
I
good.
know what it looks like, so.
What we did was we said, okay, let's just make it real simple. So folks that aren't finance related and are not gonna close their eyes when they see numbers. In terms of where we are. So we said options, we have tax. Again, the supporting page is gonna get into how do we arrive at flat charge per parcel of $179? Or to generate $1 million of revenue. So our supporting schedule is going to show the actual mathematical calculation. How do we arrive at $179? It'll also specify that revenue source is only going to come from owners of parcels that are taxable as compared to exempt property owners. So people will be able to understand where that burden is falling on, who it's falling on, and who it's not falling on. We're not going to get into the issues of fairness and equity and those types of things. It just becomes so subjective. I think every intelligent person can kind of figure out, wait a minute, is tax really the way to go? Is that really fair to everybody in the community? But that's going to be the subject of the town hall and the communication, the feedback. We're not going to try and anticipate all that. We're just going to put out the facts. The increase in tax revenue, 16%. Steve, this goes back to the meeting we had. I think one of the last meetings we had was Rich, where he did a real quick math and said, okay, based upon our total assessed value, it generated $1 million. What would be the rate of increase in the current assessment rate, the tax rate?
Correct.
And again, it may be 15.5%, it may be 15.4%, it may be 16.2%, but this is kind of in the neighborhood.
Yep.
So folks can say, okay, 16% to generate $1 million. To your point, John, about people confusing, well, if I'm gonna have a 16% tax increase, it'll be a 16% tax increase to generate $1 million. Over here on the side, we have the engineer's analysis that's dynamic, that's changing by the month, where we have a total project cost of $20 million. And that may change a year from now, 6 months from now, but if it's $20 million and they're telling me my tax is going to increase by 16%, well, I'm paying $1,000 now. I'm going to pay $160 more, and I'm going to pay that for the next 20 years. Now, if they can't figure that out, and I'm not sure how we can kind of help them over that hurdle, but to your point, what we're trying to do is focus on clear path so people can understand what the ramification is to them. And we spend a lot of time on this, and that's going to be part of this communication. It's really going to have to help people understand. Oh, $179, I'll pay that once, that's fine. No, it's going to be $179 per million. So now you have to actually look at
What do you mean?
what's
Per million?
per $1 million of revenue. To generate $1 million of revenue, based upon the number of taxable parcels we have in the township, it translates into
Because,
$170.
and just so we're clear, that's based on assessment.
No, it's based on the number of parcels.
The 179, the.
The 179, the flat tax. We had the total number of taxable parcels.
I'm sorry. Yep.
And and Steve, what you just did is exactly, we're gonna have to go through that about 17 times.
Yeah.
In order for people to really understand what's going on, but the attachment will show them. We have our key fact sheet. Well, in our key fact sheet, we have the total number of parcels, total number of taxable parcels, total number of exempt parcels. So
Yeah,
our formula will show where that number's coming from.
Yeah, and so just so you know, there's a recent court case that will probably throw out the latter. The one related to flat fee on all parcels.
Okay,
So just so you know.
Which one is it?
There's, huh?
I'll look it up. Which one is it?
I'll have to get it for you. It just came out recently. But basically it came back and said the argument was that stormwater is a community-wide issue, not an individual parcel issue. And so therefore, if you're exempt, you should be exempt from that fee as well. And the court agreed.
whoa.
I'll get you the information, but that's what it basically meant.
So basically fee would be charge that is not based upon assessed value. It would be based upon some other basis. Like we're saying, ownership of a parcel. You could own 1/4 of an acre, or you could own 5 acres. You're gonna pay that same flat charge. If you're saying, no, we can't do that because it includes exempt exempt parcels for tax purposes. All right, so that kind of narrows down what, if that is in fact the case, it makes this particular project pretty simple.
We're gonna, I've
That's a
asked,
Supreme Court case, a PA Supreme Court case?
I'll have to go back and tell you which one. I don't know exactly. I just know what came down. I just got it from, I haven't had a chance to really go through the whole thing yet. I just got it from our solicitor. He just let us know last week, or I think it was, you need to be aware of this before you move forward
Mhm.
so that we know how we go
Can you
forward.
flip it to me?
Yeah.
Which,
The only thing that would, I think would make this, would take some of the heat off of you is if you just add per annum to the end of that sentence
which sentence, John?
at the top.
Here, per annum.
Yeah, right.
But it's
Because-
really per million, because we
No,
make.
but third million per annum.
Yeah.
Because
It's not a one.
what you're doing, while you're saying this, you're saying, we're gonna do this little exercise to raise $1 million. If you add per annum,
You see, but I don't want to use that word, John. There's a very, the reason why is there may become a point where we need to generate in 1 year to fund what is currently failing. We need to raise $3 million. So if you go back and say, wait a minute, you told me I was only going to pay 179, but we need 3 million, not 1 million. Your charge is going to be 3 times 179. That's why we didn't do that.
right,
If you're saying the annual cap, that
And
the
I'm not-
most amount that
and
can be
that's-
raised is $1
but-
million, that's fine.
but the
That-
same, the same way you're saying, if we only need to raise $1 million, this is how much it's gonna cost you.
People may say, well, okay, that's fine, I'll pay $179 once. You gotta marry that with the engineer's project that says there's $20 million that has
Right,
to be.
so I
expended.
took a partial step towards
Connecting the two,
connecting the engineer's report, and all I'm saying is there has to be a better way
okay,
to let them know that it's gonna be more than,
yeah, I mean,
$1
we can, no, I get what you're saying. We don't want to mislead. I know where you're coming, and obviously it's coming from experience. So you've stepped on this landmine
Yeah.
a couple of times.
Yep.
So one of the things that we could do, and one of the points that I had is, we're gonna need I guess in the township website, we're gonna need a portal that contains publicly available information regarding stormwater. And one of the things that's gonna need to be placed there is the current engineer's report on what the cost projection is. Because then with a schedule like this, you could immediately put in highlight that says, see current engineer's report for total cost, total projected cost. So that way people won't be misled with, what do you mean you charge me more than $179?
I have another idea. We could, in addition to that, layer on other examples. So this is to raise 1 million, maybe we put another in for 3 million, another for 5 and
Yeah.
10.
Yeah.
Or, you know,
What do we expect would be the most we would need to generate?
That's a TBD. Supposing we have a California storm. That's what we're focused on. If we have the luxury of time, Alex,
I got you.
we may be able to say, you know what, this is gonna be, it won't be any more than $1 million a year. Well, I don't wanna say that.
I got you, but what you're really saying on that line tax of the.
So-
You're saying is after the 179, it needs to say per million per year. Which now you've already probably lost some people. That's what you're saying, right? It's $179.
I don't wanna say per year. I don't wanna say per
No,
year.
he's saying per million per year, so if it's 3 million, it's 3 times that number for that given year.
Right, my
Which
point
will
is
be
nobody's
more-
gonna read it that way, so the maximum that you expect would be.
But then you're asking the Board of Supervisors to without knowing all of the variables, put a cap on it. And
I
I think that would be
it's-
imprudent. I mean, I'll do anything anybody that the
Yeah.
committee wants to do. But what I think would be not prudent is to put an artificial cap on what the charge will be to the residential taxpayers in any given year, where we don't know what the magnitude could be because of an unexpected catastrophe.
Is this big an issue?
Yeah.
I think they,
Dollars of stormwater damage.
Hey, supposing right out here, supposing there's a flood in that stream that comes down from Ellis, takes out